So texture maps in general help drive a lot of what you literally see in a game engine as that tofu costume's being rendered. So understandably, it's without visuals in front of me and showing. It's like it's a little hard to describe quickly, but
don't worry. I drew a visual. It's fine.
Sure. I mean, as long as it explains it.
Don't worry. Jackie's got the visuals covered.
And so it's like, I think that's like 3 layers of art there, right? So you have your background art, then you have like the level graphics, and then I think on top of that you would have
so proud of herself graphics.
I mean, because there's several methods, and like what you guys describe philosophically probably exists, but I mean, it's not what I do personally. But I mean,
probably exists.
Yeah, I mean, like
the whole both wrong
in your own ways, but like remember that part where.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. We're experts now. I'm your host, Rebecca Buckley.
I am another host that you may know by Jackie. Why can I never say it like a normal human being? I try to get witty, I try to get cutesy, and then I just end up sounding weird and awkward.
Witty and cute. I loved it. Yeah, we're getting back in the swing of things. We had a well-deserved little break, some time off, and we're just getting the juices flowing again.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like forever since we've recorded. To you guys, no time has actually lapsed. We have given you weekly updates. A couple of them were shorter, so thanks for bearing with us. But I mean, it's been like a month. So I went to Portugal and Australia at my time off. One was for pleasure. I went with my family and hung out for a little bit. And then one was for just for work and getting some stuff done. But it's been, it's weird to even like, I feel like you and I haven't talked in forever.
I know you've been just hopping around time zones and time traveling and just getting different continents under your belt, concerts under your belt.
Yeah. World Soccer Cups. So that was really cool too.
That's right.
I've seen it all. I did it all. This is like really probably been the most un-me month I've had in a long time of just like so much social interaction, so much like time with people. But no, it was a good month. And then look at you, like you've been really getting those gigs lately. So I know while I've been over here like gallivanting around the globe, you've been getting to business, haven't you?
That's right. Yeah. I did a staycation because who would want to go on vacation when you live in the best place in the world, Los Angeles? Said only partially sarcastically. I actually did go to the beach, which I was proud of. I had a beach moment. I'm not really a beach girl, but I did it. And then, I've been having nose to the grindstone in comedy. I'm hosting an open mic. I had a show at Flappers in Burbank. I had a show at El Cid. With a headliner that's one of my favorites. Shout out Kurt Brownohler. He's the first comedian that I actually saw in LA. So it's a real full circle moment to see our cute little heads on the same flyer. And now I can call him a peer, even though we didn't meet at all. But that's because he's a busy working comedian. He had to rush right out to headline somewhere else. And then I booked my next gig at the Comedy Store in La Jolla at the end of August, which I'm very excited for. It's my first Comedy Store show. So. Oh, and then I made a sketch team at the Pack Theater here in Los Angeles. So now I'm going to be I'm leaving the dark waters of stand-up comedy to go into the cartoonishly bright waters of sketch comedy. Well, not leaving, but I'll be going back and forth.
I believe this episode we're really close to when we're recording from when this will broadcast, which is very rare for us. So I think this episode will come out before your show. So listeners, if you're in the San Diego area, come check out Bex. I am actually going to come down and support. So we'll put that information on social media if anyone wants to come see us.
August 30th, last Wednesday of August.
Yes. And because of that, we will also probably do a San Diego visiting episode. So keep your eyes out for that too. But congrats, Betch. That was like all such big news. Like I feel like every time I talk to you while I was gone, I would be like, I'm miserable and exhausted because I just got off like a bajillion hours of planes. And you're like, I booked another show. And I was like, I am loving you, this hard work. You were killing it. It was cool. Very good job. Proud of you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a lot of fun. So fun stuff to look forward to. And what are we looking forward to? Or do we have an amateur alert this week?
We do have an amateur alert. We'll keep this one a little bit short and sweet since we did a little
Perfect.
touch up there. But I recently figured out why men use tool belts, because I always was just like, that's a weird like fashion accessory, you know? Like I just kind of thought they like wore it because like they liked it, right? Um, anyways, I have like 2-story
Because we
windows
know men are fashion icons.
Yes, absolutely. I have like these 2-story windows in my apartment, and the sun hits them in the morning. I don't have AC because I live in the San Francisco area, and it stays cool here most of the year. But on the really hot days, it gets really sunbeams in. So I decided I was going to hang up these curtains, and so I had to buy a special ladder, get up there. And when
Oh my
I like was
God.
going to go up there, I was like, well, where the fuck am I going to put my screwdriver and my drill
Start juggling
and my
wrenches.
bits and stuff? Well, I'm me, so I went and got a fanny pack, and
Hey, that's a good,
right?
belt bag. Yeah, a good substitute.
It did not work as well, right? But I finally up there was like, okay, the tool belt is not an accessory option. It is a necessity, because when you're in a tight spot and you're getting your work in on your house or whatever, you need that tool belt. So
Men
that was
love a
my
hands-free
amateur alert.
accessory.
Mhm.
Yes,
Well, I'm
yes.
also too stubborn to ever ask for help. So if everyone's like, you should probably like, hire somebody to do this, I'm going to Google it and I'm going to figure out how to do it myself. So
I like that. Yeah, I feel like, it's good that we have the apps, the Task Rabbits, the Thumbtacks, the what have yous, but a lot of times you could just do it faster and cheaper yourself
I
and
just like, I
learn
hate
to
being
do it
a
right.
single woman who can't do it by herself. I
Yeah.
want to be able to do everything. Like, I hate when people are like, oh, you need a man. I'm like, no, I don't need no man. I do need a tool belt though. So,
Yes. Or a man
all
to
right.
hold your tools.
No, I don't need the man.
But if you're
Okay.
using them as an accessory.
Okay, that's like the one exception. The one exception. All right.
Well, good for
Speaking of,
you. You got up that ladder.
I did get up the ladder. It was very scary, and it was very hot because it was a hot day and I was sweaty and I didn't like it. But speaking of things that we are amateurs on, what are we learning about this week?
We are learning about something that is a niche of a niche that we were already uneducated on in the first place. So we're going into the world of video games to
Oh God.
talk
Okay.
about 3D character art.
Okay.
Thoughts?
All right. I mean, my brother is in the video game industry, so I don't play video games really, but I would like to say that I like know a little bit about it, right? Like I have grown up with somebody who played video games, like that. He was always a gamer, and he works in that industry now, and we talk a lot. That's about
And what have you? Okay, you didn't absorb anything. Okay, good.
I mean, I feel like I know more about the business than the 3D art animation. I feel like one thing that I know is something that I actually learned from you was like how the green screen and like the video game voice art, like we've talked about that because you were like saying, you were telling me about how like they do like the motion and stuff for video
Yeah,
games one
yeah.
time.
They call mocap, the motion
Thank you.
capture that
Yes.
you can. It's a good job as an actor to get. They put the little mask on it with the little pin. It has like these little white balls on it, so it kind of like tracks the different like points of your face as you're acting and portraying the character, and then they can. So that I guess could be one angle in, right? That's like the motion capture angle of like they're using a live actor to capture the action and render it then in their animation program versus fully created by an artist, rendered by an artist, 3D characters. Or maybe we'll find that there is crossover and that's part of where the 3D artist takes over. I don't fully know. I
I
think it's
stopped listening to
newer.
what you said a minute ago, and I have no idea. Like after you said mocap, and I was like, "Yeah, I remember that word." I was like, "What?" So yeah, I mean,
Obviously,
the ball
before there
things
was
make
that,
sense.
there had to have been just animators, just
So
character
like
artists.
Mortal Kombat, like I think that's just cartoon
Yes.
style, right?
Yes.
So that's probably like maybe we do
And
it in
that's
time.
2D. That's 2D, right? Because you're just going, it's a side scroller.
Okay, let's start with the beginning. Okay. So in the beginning there was like Pong, which you didn't really have to
Yes.
animate much, I'm assuming, right? And then when
That's
you go
computer
from
programming.
yes, because it's really just like on off is what you're doing there. Okay, and so then as we progressed in the Atari was a little bit before my time. Like my brothers had an Atari and they played it while I was alive, but that's like probably when I was like under 4,
Yeah, I don't
right?
know
And
what an
so
Atari is.
it was the pre Super Nintendo.
Okay,
Um
I had an NES.
Yeah, so like after Atari came Nintendo's, like I don't remember exactly which one came in what order, and then somewhere around that time you got PlayStation because they had Sonic the Hedgehog, and those are definitely, I think you're right, 2D cartoon style art, right? So you're animating probably movements and the backgrounds didn't remove. Like if you think about like Mario originally, he's like jumping around a screen, but the background didn't really like move,
Yeah, for
remember?
some
Like it
of
was
those, they were like those mini levels where you're just like moving up and down like a level. But then
mhm.
sometimes I think it's like they just draw the character and then they
Yeah.
change the background to scroll behind it.
Well, like the background scrolls, and then there's like there's like things that the Mario or whatever is engaging with, and so it's like I think that's like 3 layers of art there, right? So you have your background art, then you have like the level graphics, and then I think on
Yeah.
top of that you would have
So proud of herself. Graphics.
then the last like then you put like the Mario, and that's probably like the hardest part of that, right? So and I think Sonic and a lot of games in the 90s era, that's how they looked. And then you got to Mario
64
64. Yeah,
had that as
and that
well. It was a
was like
big Mario 64 girl.
yeah, and it was like game changing because like everything was so real, like right, like the balloons in Mario Kart looked round, and so I think that's when you start to probably enter the very beginning phases of what we're talking about now of 3D art animation, because although Mario Kart and the 64 looked game changing back then, it looks nothing to the way it looks like boxy. Remember, it was very like boxy and kind of
Yeah.
clunky, and like things didn't always like you could
Like
sometimes
you could
see
see the
like
edges on a circle.
purple. Yeah, like right, it was. And now I think in a lot of games, like everything doesn't seem real because they haven't like they're still cartoonish. It's still a video game, but it like looks like fingers and grasps things like hands, you know, like in the game things are much realer than they were, like that weird very clunkiness. But I do think it's the same, I think that's the same timeline, it's the same genre of what creation, 3D art and animation.
Yeah, now it's so hyper realistic, and that's kind of one of my favorite areas of gaming. I played the Nintendo Switch Zelda Breath of the Wild during
Mhm.
pandemic, and like that game was my escape back into nature during lockdown. And it like the graphics on water have, I feel like, come such a long way, and just the like
Yeah.
beauty of the nature. It's so much so that like when I would actually go back, I was crossing the Golden Gate Bridge. I was like, I went looking down the rocks. Like, I wonder if there's treasure down there. And it's like, no, this is not the video game. The video game is somehow like more realistic than life. But there's, I think, also probably different specializations, right? Like people who
Yeah.
do water, grass, trees, people who do like monsters, bad guys, and people who do like main character art.
Well, I even knew somebody who did the clouds for Pixar, right? Like, and that was like
Just the
his jam,
clouds.
just the clouds, like, right? Like, like, and so
Big
I,
cloud
I think
guy.
you're totally right. Like, there's like probably like the tree guy and like the whatever, and they all. So like my brother again, like I know one of his colleagues is like the game like lead for their company, right? I don't know anyone's titles. I'm not going to share anyone's names, but um
Game
I know
warden.
that that one guy has been really a game lead in a lot of different like companies, and so I think in a big game launches, and so I think that there are people who are high up who are like, okay, I see the world, right? Like, and I And
Mm.
then you have the people who are really creating that story content, and the people who are creating like the other parts of the content, like the storyline, what's needed within there. And then I think that like you have these kind of different areas. It's all led by like a game lead who's like, that is the world, and like creating the strategy. There are other people creating the money system or whatever it may be. And then you
Mm.
have the animators who I do think that are that pieces, right? Like, oh, I do the trees, I do dungeons, right? I do weapons. Right? Like how cool would it be
Ooh,
to be like, yeah,
yeah.
I'm the dungeon master of the of this blada blada game.
And weapons too, because then I bet people get like, oh, very historically accurate with these weapons, or like, how are they going to function? How are you going to interact with them? And yeah, all the programming stuff kind of baffles me. But yeah, I think, oh, also Mythic Quest. When you were talking about the game lean, it made me think of that TV show. There's a TV show with
I
Rob
was just
McElhenney
thinking of that. Yeah,
called
yeah.
Mythic Quest, and yeah, he's kind of like the brains behind it. Oh, and I think he also codes. Yeah, but then they also have like the story. Oh no, it's the coder, and then he's the idea guy. And so it's like, yeah, those two kind of like brains that you need to do video games, of like who's seeing the big picture and the story, and then how do you bring that to life. It's like kind of like when we're talking about writing a song. It's like, how do you translate your emotions into like the words, the meaning, the color, the harmony, and how do you make a story and bring it to life with these characters and how they interact with the world.
And then I think furthermore, you have to like, as someone who's played Dungeons and Dragons, I've had different dungeon masters, right? And each one creates a different game, and each one is engaging in different ways. Like I might have preferences there, right? Like there's also the team that creates all of this video game content and strategy, and then you have to go to the go-to-market team, right? Is this actually
Mm.
sellable? Right? Like, did you just create a world that's like, oh my God, it's so community based. This is amazing. There's absolutely no way to market it or make money off of this game. What are we even doing? Right. So I think there's a lot of other factors that like feed into like, you know, if you see that like if you see like a straight line like through the game, like that vein, like there's the game lead, like all these
Mm.
other veins like kind of reach into it, and they have to feed off of each other. So I think that's like super interesting because one, when we talk about video games, success of them really comes from them being sellable, if we're being real. And creating a good story is super important. And having a fantastical world is super important, but you got to have people that want to engage with it too.
There's
So you
that
have to
business
have,
side again.
yeah, I know. I always want to see that business side.
Well, how do we think then, starting with how do you become a 3D character animator, and kind of what do we think the process is for creating these characters?
So I know that I forget what it's called. There's a school in like Emeryville, that's for like graphic design and stuff. Like it feeds almost directly into Pixar. Forget what it's called, but I knew a bunch of people going that went there growing up. I think that you have to go to school for it, right? I think most of the time you're going to want to have some sort of, like, it's the same thing with most art, right? Like you can have a natural talent, but you're going to want to learn how to hone it and like learn how to use that talent with other people. So you probably got to go to school. You probably have to
Yeah.
take a shitty job at the beginning, right? Like we
An
all do. Like when
internship.
yeah, like we all start at the bottom, right? Like I think unless you are one of those people who's just like, oh, I was a hacker at 10 and then I just learned how to do graphic design and I just had this natural ability for it and I had the right programs and I'm just a savant. Like maybe those people don't have to go to school, but I think for the most part, you're going to have to go to the traditional route that most of us have to take, would be my guess.
Yeah, I think with any artist, any craft person, it's like you have to some way demonstrably learn your craft. You have to learn your tools. Probably the smart way is to have a accredited certification through some kind of university program, because they're so good, they're so competitive. But you have to
Education
some
and
way
training.
learn your tools. Yeah. And then you've got to do your apprenticeship. You've got to go get the experience or the in at some established organization where you would like to work, I guess, and where you can actually get work doing that. And it's probably, yeah, it's those, like, it starts out with those nerdy kids who are always sketching characters in their notebooks and like making little drawings, doodles all the time. And then it's like, oh, you probably have to like get industry level competitive. Like, what are the tools that people are using? Like, Photoshop is not the right example, but like literally, what's the program that you should know how to use?
I mean, probably knowing how to use Photoshop is helpful, but I think you hit on like an interesting point there with like, I was thinking about it the other day that um, I'm an event planner, and like really my first taste of planning events was putting on punk rock shows for like my boyfriend's bands in high school. And I never really thought about event planning, but I think you hit on it there with like the people who are drawing. Like, I think that you have this natural ability to lean towards something, whether you can see the transferable skills from the very beginning of like, oh, this is clearly what I was doing at that age, right? I think, a lot of that creation and graphic design probably does come from artistic talent as well, like drawing and, like knowing how to create artistically on a, in life medium versus a digital medium.
Yeah, and could be a family trade. Maybe you're like, my dad was an old school animator, and you're like, no, Dad, I want to be a dentist. And he's like, you're going to the animation lab.
That would be so great. I want to see that movie. Dad, I want to be a dentist. I just love the teeth.
I want to be
Um,
normal.
so yeah, I think you have, and I've said this a million times. I don't know if I've said it previously in the podcast, but I've always believed that like to be successful, to be famous, to be the number one in your industry, it takes three parts. It takes natural talent, something that you were just born with, or ability that you grew when you were young and you just love it and it builds your fire, right? Then it takes like education and training. Like you need to have some knowledge and something built off of it. Example with you and your acting, like you are naturally funny. You have always been hilarious to me. You have taken a lot of classes and you've been honing your talent. The last part is completely out of your control and it's luck, right? Like you can have the best education and you can have a shit ton of skill, but if you bomb every interview, or if life comes up with just like you never are in the right room with the right person, that's something that you can't overcome. So I think these people who make it in this business, I'm imagining that there's a lot of people who want to be a 3D animator for freaking video games. That sounds really cool, honestly. So to be successful in that, you probably have to have that natural skill, and then you have to have that education and training. And then you need to be in the right place in the right time to impress the right people with what you have.
Yeah, I think, and this is something that comes up a lot in a town like Los Angeles, the idea that luck is definitely one of the ingredients. Maybe it's kind of the make or break ingredient in most cases. It's that final piece, like you're saying. And the thing that we try to create for ourselves as artists is luck. And it is that being in the right place at the being in the right place at the right time with the right skills and experience. And so it's like preparing yourself for, what is it? I've also heard it called like when preparation meets opportunity. That's how you
Yeah.
make your own luck.
Hmm.
You get as prepared as you can and you get in the
Hmm.
places where that luck would happen.
Yeah.
And I think with something like 3D animation or 3D character art, I see it as one of those things where these are nerds, like in the truest, best complimentary way. It's like what got their passions ignited, what gets their curiosity going. And it's like that's how you get so good at something. Is just like, I just like it. I just want it. This is the thing. I love video games. I want to pay tribute to them. I love characters. I want to create them. And it's just like you get so curious and wrapped up in it that's how you get so like specialized in a way. Like you get a specialization. It's just staying interested in a subject.
Okay, so I think we've covered the who. I think we've covered the how and the why, the
Then
what
how do they get it in the
and the where.
screens? They get it on the
Yeah,
paper,
I
or
think
then they get it on the screens.
I think the where is probably technology, right? Like that is obviously, I imagine that there's a lot of tablets I've seen a lot of graphic designers work on. They sketch it on a tablet and then they
Mm-hmm.
transfer that onto usually like a regular, not a laptop, like a big PC that can do lots of stuff. It's got a
Processing.
lot of RAM and memory and things like that. And then I think that they have a lot of programs that probably, so laugh at me, take that and help you make it 3D. So first you're going to have to take
Mm.
the sketch that you made and turn it 3D. So you're going to have to bring it to life. And then you're going to have to give it motion and other things like activity. If it's like an animal or, a human or something that you can work with, you probably have to give it some that,
I think when you're on the sketch pad, you're looking at it on the screen. So you're drawing and it's coming out on the screen. And I think you can move it and turn it. And you've got like a 3D model that you're essentially like rendering on your tablet.
But how are you drawing it in 3D?
It's how you draw in 3D.
I think you have to do it in 2D and then convert it to 3D, and then you can move it around like you were saying.
I don't think so. I think you start with like a figure, like I think you can draw in 3D on, I mean, yeah, you could do it on Photoshop. So I think that the tablet is just like having like an extended keyboard or something. It's just like instead of drawing it with your mouse right into the program, you've got like the tablet, so you can like use it more like a stylus, and then you just like you're drawing, and then you tap a button, and then you have like a mouse that will like turn your model, and then you draw, and then you turn your model.
How is your computer going to automatically know if something's rounded versus like a straight edge? Like, that's kind of what I'm saying.
I think
like,
that's all in the program. It's like, which tool are you using? A line? Are you using a drag the line to make it a curve? Are you using points? Because you can do on Photoshop.
Sketch and then you convert. Yeah, I think you have to sketch it separately and then you have to convert it into an image. And you're betting on that when you sketch it, you give it that animation that you want it to have, like as you're pulling like the lines. Like if you're like, for example, like when you do like Photoshop and you're like, oh, I want to use a paintbrush versus a marker, like you're saying, I'm picking the rounded tool versus the straight edge tool when I'm drawing this line. Okay. I'm fascinated to find out. Neither of us is right. He's like, actually, you all just
you sacrifice a goat at midnight and you dream about it with your teeth under the pillow, and it sort of the animation gods give you some version of that. There's a lot of blood sacrifice in 3D character art, from what I understand. So, as our guest will be able to tell us, he is a true professional. He's got some pretty sweet gigs under his belt, and has, I think a lot of different angles on this as well that we'll get into. Is there anything we feel like we want to cover? Questions we want to bring up? Things that we're curious about?
So much, but I'm not going to list them now. I'm probably going to just rudely
What's your favorite character?
Our guest.
Do you have like a video game character you really like, or?
I mean, I'm a Mario girl, right? Like that's like the only game. Oh, no, Snake Pass, the snake from Snake Pass. I think I did this in a previous episode.
Snake Pass. I don't even know what that is.
It's like, everyone always thinks it's like the snake on your, like, your video game where you like follow the apple thing. And it's like, no, like the character is a snake and you like slither around and you have to like climb up a tree and like swirl around it and then like reach out for an apple and then you like unswirl around it.
And then you start Original Sin and you can.
And this is why we have a YouTube channel now. Listeners, if you could see the motions that I was just making, you would understand why we needed a YouTube. And follow, like, subscribe, and listen. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for making this YouTube worth all the watches, all the views. What's my favorite character? I really like Stardew Valley. So I love my cute little. Yeah, and I think when I played My Time at Portia, which is of a similar genre, and the characters were the most disappointing part of the game, if I could say anything about it, because they were too Disney-fied. It was like kind of like Uncanny Valley, surreal, like childlike kind of. I liked about Stardew Valley that they look like characters, but also you could sort of put your own, like, I'm like, oh, that's this person, my parallel of like my friend that I know, or I'm putting, that kind of, you could put some of your imagination on a character.
So all you said was Disney, and I just remembered that last night and my exhaustion, and I think I was PMSing. I watched Mulan and cried 5 times.
Oh,
5 times for no reason. Like when the dad was like, the most beautiful flower blooms late or whatever, and I just ugly cried. I was like, something's wrong with me.
Well, that's big part of characters, right? You have to be invested in them, and you have to like.
I was invested yesterday.
They're pulling you along through that story. Yeah.
Okay. Well, are we gonna go learn about 3D character animation?
Let's get our head in the game and learn about some 3D character art.
Welcome back from the break, everyone. I hope you got your little snacks, your munchies, or that you're halfway done with cleaning your kitchen like I like to do when I'm listening to my pods. But welcome back. Bex, who do we have with us here this week?
Wow, thank you for welcoming us back. Since you saw us last, I've cut my own bangs. I've done cleaning up of my own. We have a very special guest here. I'm in his living room. This is exciting. We're in the Panda house. Pandemonium. Panda, please tell us a little about yourself.
Panda life. Okay.
Okay. So legally, it's Brian Choi. Nickname's Panda. I am a senior 3D character artist at Industrial Light and Magic Immersive. Which, if that means anything, is specifically just imagine a weird game dev team within the ILM superstructure that it is. And what else do you want to know?
That made it crystal clear.
Okay.
So that was.
Do you work on particular games, or do you like have like a broad spectrum where you work on everything?
Historically, I've had the broad spectrum of working on a bunch of different things at once, or at any one time. In ILM specifically, I would describe it as I'm fairly specialized, give or take a couple of responsibilities that blend into like other artists' area. But this is probably the first time in my career that I've very much most of the time I'm like focused on the one discipline that I've hired on for. And then games wise, it varies for ILM immersive, but it really just depends on if the project happens to fit the mission objective, which is interactive storytelling. So if you look at previous titles like Vader Immortal or Tales from Galaxy's Edge, those are VR games, but they achieve that objective of immersive storytelling with whatever ILM happens to be doing. Like ILM worked on some sort of NFT thing, or ILM Immersive worked on some sort of NFT thing for the guy who filmed, or the director of Roma. But that's not a VR thing necessarily. It's like a weird combination art project.
That won the Oscar, yeah?
Roma did, yeah. This separate thing is like I think it's like an NFT plus like a short film plus a VR experience.
We talked with Modest about NFTs being like you could envision it as a kind of space and experience. That was a weird.
Wait, I have a question. So do you do VR stuff then?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, to me, VR is just a platform. So if it happens to be VR, great. For example,
so you do multiple platforms then. So you do VR, PlayStation, other game consoles.
Yes, like I've built a lot of different games for different platforms. Yeah.
Okay, so that's like that discipline, like your ability to create that art. It doesn't really matter as much as the medium that it's being produced across, as much as like the art that you create.
Sometimes, I mean, VR has its own, what I would describe as both medical and technical needs. Very much technical on the front end, but then most of the times games are pretty smart, or they should be smart about maximizing and delivering on the platform they're working on. Like, there's a difference between making a game for Nintendo Switch versus PS5. Like, PS5 just has more raw power, but then if you think about like a recent game like Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, that game is deliberately simple looking, so to speak, but that's because it's taking advantage of the Switch's various features and minimizing the amount of like technical issues that would arise if Zelda for some reason looked more realistic.
Okay. And what is the most realistic, like what is the creme de la creme of like, oh, like if I can like build a game on this is the hardest and most cool one to do?
Frankly, any of the platforms, I think. It just depends on what the game is. And that sounds frustrating, understandably, but it's so much of this just dependent on what is the game and what are you trying to do with the game, or what's the thrust of the game. Because Angry Birds is perfect on tablet and phones. Like, that's the perfect experience, like gestures, dragging stuff, short, simple gameplay. Like, yes, it would be impressive if you move something like, Uncharted, the PlayStation series, onto Switch, but that would be insane if they did that as an initial thing. It makes sense that they do it on the PS4 or 5 because that's where a lot of available power is, and you have a lot of ability to do realistic stuff more easily. So my answer, frustratingly, is just being, what is the game and what are you trying to take advantage of, kind of thing.
I'm honestly like learning so much about myself as a gamer just through this conversation.
Right.
'cause
And
I'm
this
like,
is just the intro.
yeah, I was like, I only like Mario, and I only like the Switch and things that you play Mario on.
That's
I'm a
totally
simple
valid.
gamer. Yeah, I
I
don't want a
know.
complex game. I don't want a lot of power behind the
Yeah.
game. I want to know how to do it, and I want to check out for 3 hours. Like that's.
And
But
that's the
that
reason why
being said,
Nintendo sells so much, because they know people like you exist, and they just want like, not complicated, but like just the right amount of challenge and easy accessible games kind of thing.
yeah, user-friendly games. That's what
Yeah.
I'm gonna call it. Like it's like I don't
It's
have to
cozy.
like commit to like being good at it. Like when I play like Mortal Kombat or whatever, I'm button mashing. Like I'm not
Yeah.
learning the combos. Like I'm just seeing what happens. And so I don't want to do that. And that's why I like the visuals of Zelda a
Mhm.
lot. I love watching people play Zelda. I absolutely hate playing it myself. I feel overwhelmed. I feel really stressed out. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, and I can't remember like what the quest was. So,
Well, speaking of remembering what the quest is, this was our brief, complex intro to the complex person of Brian. And I know I want to treat this like an astrology reading. Like, tell me the best, because I want to buy a new platform, but
Okay.
for the purposes of our dear format that we always sidetrack on, wonderful to have you here on the pod. And
Good to be here.
do you have a rating for Jackie and I on our poor explanation of 3D character art, which we were apparently already off the path a little bit?
Like 7 out of 10. Like that argument you guys had about how to move like a 2D image
big
into...
debate. Yeah, 2D,
Yeah.
3D drawing, rendering.
Right. I mean, because there's several methods, and like what you guys describe philosophically probably exists, but I mean, it's not what I do personally. But
probably.
I mean,
Wait,
like,
Probably exists.
yeah, I mean,
we
like
were
the whole
both wrong.
in your own ways, but like remember that part where it's like you guys talk about the circle? Like, yeah, in
Yes.
3D space, circles are really just a whole bunch of like linear edges stacked against each other, and so in reality, it's like this. Let's put it this way: like, I can make at a minimum a hexagon, and I can get away with it looking like a circle within the like aesthetic and the art direction of the games of a video game. Because if that's established in the game, like, hey, like we can't obviously do like a visibly perfect circle, but if like a bunch of circles are defined as like a hexagon shape, then you'll buy it in your head that's a hexagon. But that's also like efficient. I mean, you go to play Zelda, there's a bunch. Zelda's such a low poly game, but you just don't notice it because the universe looks the way it does.
Yeah.
So, but like mathematically, it's technically a 6-sided polygon. And then now, like on PS5, yeah, we can add like what? I'm like, what's the method? Like, if I'm building a circle for let's call it a standard AAA game, start with like 64 sides. And there's a couple options because it's a lot. It's at most ranges, it's gonna look like a circle, even though it's a 64-sided polygon. And 2, if we need to add or remove edges, it's very easy to do that by selecting every other edge and then deleting every other edges.
Is that why it's Mario 64?
64 is in reference to, most likely, if I recall correctly, the 64-bit.
Bit, I for some reason associate that word with 64, but I don't know why. I don't know what that even relates to.
I got to double check, but
Frames per second?
Nope.
I'm like, no.
I think it's the like 64-bit RAM, essentially, like the active memory.
Yeah, bit processing unit. I googled.
Right, and because it's a real-time thing.
Yeah, instead of making you panic that entire time, I could have just googled it from the beginning. But
Right.
yes,
Beautiful.
You were actually totally right, though. That's actually quite impressive.
So 7 out of 10. Like, you guys got a lot of things right fundamentally, but then like it just kind of depends on what angle you decide to go with and what tools people actually use instead. But like the philosophy stuff is kind of there. So
yeah.
So where do you draw it first? Do you draw it on a tablet first, or do you draw it on a computer, or is the tablet part of the computer device?
Am I trying to make a 3D character model in the end?
Yes.
Okay, usually it'll be a straight up 3D modeling. Like, I'm making 3D objects in 3D space. It's not to say, like, if I was doing it from scratch, like if you gave me like if there's no existing character 2D illustration concept art, then yeah, I'll be on a tablet or a piece of paper figuring out the visual look of it, and then in 3D modeling package, block out. Let's just call it a human character. Like, block out the human character, block out the clothes, costumes, accessories, and then I'll bounce back and forth between, like, at least these days for me, Moto and ZBrush, to get a final sculpture. And I can go through the whole like pipeline process of what it means to take it from like not existing to like, hey, there's a physical 3D model, it's fully textured and painted, and on to the next step, which is rigging, which is a 3D animation related discipline, which is its own within our environment is its own super discipline. Like I'm good at my job, and I'm only good at like a part of the pipeline.
She's scrambling for a notepad, folks.
Right.
She's taking notes already.
Exactly what I was doing. All I found was a Post-it note again. Okay. I think we should start at the beginning because
Right. This honestly can go on a bunch of different tangents. We could talk industry, we could talk technicals, we could talk why I'm doing this.
I do want to get like it can be bare bones, but like an encapsulation of starting from nothing, it ends up as a 3D thing for the sake of that. But then also just like for people interested in getting into, we should later get into like education and things like that. But yeah, just like a soup to nuts.
Okay, let's use an obvious character like Mario, right? Let's say it's the new Mario costume,
Thank you.
Mario in a tofu costume.
Is that part of the Struck AMTP companies? Are we allowed to talk about Mario? We're not in I'm not in SAG.
Oh, no, this gets filed away as parody law. So like, there's obviously no tofu costume, maybe, but there isn't one right now. So let's say guy comes, we need a Mario in a tofu costume. We don't know what it looks like because it doesn't exist. No one's illustrated it. Now I'm still pretty decent at drawing and painting that I can get a concept design done, like 2D illustration done. So I will take the time to do thumbnails, which is just like generally silhouette drawings of what Mario in a tofu costume should look like if it was just a black silhouette. Because there's basically this philosophy of like memorable characters of strong silhouettes. You think about Darth Vader,
yes,
that particular shape of his bucket head and the cape, it's like wedge on wedge. So if you like squint your eyes, you can tell it's Darth Vader still.
Batman.
Yeah, great. It's a great example. 2 horns, big ass cape, right?
Wow.
And then if he's not, if you can see his chest, it's like a reverse trapezoid, skinny legs. But you guys remember that shape, like either subconsciously or consciously. So let's assume that we start from thumbnails, and we slowly but surely, with a group of people or just by yourself, you winnow down what looks like the best thumbnail. And then once you figure that out, you do a proper like illustration, full colors, or just value. Grayscale stuff, but you get to a design that's good enough that a 3D modeler like me can start making that thing in 3D space. So hand it off to a 3D character artist, me, and then I'll take that and start blocking out with basic polygons usually first, or some pre-made Mario starting like model, build out the 3D tofu costume. And in this case, like we already have the Mario model. So what I'm essentially doing is just working around Mario's existing shape or using existing parts of the Mario model to fit into this new tofu costume thing. And then that's just basic polygon modeling. The interim step, and really step 2, is assuming this is like high fidelity, like Nintendo Switch Mario still, is sculpting, which is still done digitally. But most character artists in the video game industry use a program called ZBrush or ZBrush if you're British, weirdos.
I think it's better to say ZBrush because then it sounds like zebra.
Right. I mean, I would agree too. But the zebra
do British people call them a zebra? No, probably not.
No.
Oh, I think they do. They call them zebras.
Conspiracy. Zebras. Yes, that's true.
We are making you stereotype. Let's do it.
Also, I feel like every guy in LA is always poly this, poly that. Well, I'm polygon. Okay.
There we go.
I'm going to ask a dumb question that I'm really going to regret sometime in the future. But what's
that's
a
totally
polygon?
fine.
What is it? Is it just
multi-sided
sides, or is it a specific number of sides?
Polygons?
Polygon in this case just means multi-sided.
Okay, so it can be any number.
Shape.
Okay.
Yeah. And when I use the word polygon, it simply refers to like the literal like shape of like 6 vertices would determine it being a hexagon, right? Or if it's a pentagon, it's like 5 vertices, and those 5 vertices together make the shape of a pentagon in that case. And then a box, a literal 3D space cube, is those 6 vertices and 8 vertices in 3D space, creating and defining like this is what a cube is in 3D space. So all 3D objects you see in a video game, and including VFX for film and television, are just a bunch of polygons tricking you into thinking that it's like a more complicated shape.
Math. Geometry.
Honestly, yeah.
I've always felt lied to my entire life, and I'm glad that I now have proof. So thank you.
You got to switch out parents. If you need new ones, I know some people. That's the fundamental.
Need one, but You know what?
Okay. Where did I start? Stop. So
Okay.
ZBrush 3D
Polygons with
sculpting.
high fidelity. Yeah.
Right. So in this case, like use ZBrush to basically make a 3D digital sculpture of the tofu costume, like high quality. Has high it needs to go. Probably not super complicated because it's Mario. But what you're essentially trying to do is get it to where the sculpture is finalized, and then you make a different 3D model that's called the low poly model because that's the actual thing that the game engine is going to render and run and animate, which is a significantly lower density, lower fidelity 3D model compared to the sculpture. But what we're doing is we're baking the details of the sculpture onto the low poly model via what is generally understood as a normal map, which I would just quickly describe as saying normal maps basically tell a game engine, hey, this pixel on this texture right here, I understand that the normal, the low poly model says that it's going to bend light in this one direction, but the normal map texture, is going to say that this pixel bends the light in this different direction. And conceptually, all you're doing is tricking people into thinking, or you're tricking the texture into basically bending light in a certain way that it makes it look like it has depth. So imagine a cube, and that you know it's flat. It's a flat cube, but a normal map can make it look like the surface of the cube, texture-wise, is a bunch of like rocks or pebbles because you're bending the light per pixel.
The computer just knows how to do that because science.
Science, like graphics engineering science specifically, but I'm very specifically trying to use that metaphor of like the pixels bending the light in a different way to communicate, hopefully, the idea.
Told it to. Like the computer system knows that when I tell it to do that, that's generally what should happen. It's like
That's like mapping, is you're like tagging a certain pixel and
Yep.
you're saying that this pixel is always going to react this way. So
Right.
it like has like a tent pole versus, I mean, you can't tag every pixel, but you know, there's like, I guess.
Well, you can insofar as to say with the texture, the normal texture map, and then, but the more simple version would be like in the color, which we call albedo these days, in the pipeline we use. Like a color map will tell like, hey, this pixel is red, this pixel blue, this pixel blue red. Like it's the same. Like there's those texture maps after you UV map or basically bare skin out the model, like a rug, determines like at this pixel, this is how the light bends, this is how shiny that pixel is, this is what color that pixel is, this is the direction that the water should fall should the water droplet that hits this pixel decides to pass through at a certain angle, kind of thing. So texture maps in general help drive a lot of what you literally see in a game engine as that tofu costume is being rendered. So understandably, it's without visuals in front of me and showing. It's like it's a little hard to describe quickly, but
don't worry. I drew a visual. It's fine.
Sure. I mean, as long as it explains it.
Don't worry, Jackie's got the visuals covered.
I would overall say though that game art tends to be this interesting fight of like tricking people into thinking something's a lot more complex than it looks. Like CG gets to get away with like
a lot of words, and I have understood each of those words individually,
right?
But not strung together.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you
but we got there, right? We did and then now it's a live 3D. Character?
Not quite. I mean, there's the last leg of like making sure like once the texture maps are painted in like Substance Painter in this case or Photoshop, you use Photoshop to paint texture maps. That the final step would be just making sure that it renders or literally looks the way it's supposed to look, either in Unreal Engine, Unity Engine, whatever real-time rendering engine you're using. Not too dissimilar in terms of like computer is taking the time to figure out how light refracts and whatnot on the object. In this case, the Mario tofu costume. But key difference is that unlike CG films or CG VFX, you're constantly rendering 60 frames of that image per second, for example, or like as many frames as possible. So CG movies get to do it one time. Games have to figure out like, okay, so the camera's here, and then we need to keep updating in real time how this object looks or how the light passes through, what shadows are being casted, et cetera, et cetera.
Because you don't know which way like they'll go. Like where it's like a movie, you know where the shot is going. In a video game, you don't. So you have to be able to predict for any possible outcome.
Long story short, yeah.
Fucking confusing.
Right, and then I would use it as one example. Think of the Call of Duty multiplayer games, like high fidelity, realistic. The lighting looks as good as it does. for hundreds or almost 100 players, or
Yeah.
if not more so, like, how do you problem solve that?
Did they have like a Y2K moment where they were like, too many people are logging on, this whole thing's going to crash? Or like...
Oh, probably, yeah. Like, I mean, that's them doing testing on their side internally. Like, okay, how many people can we add? What's the optimal number of players? There's this interesting bit about that there's this theory, I think, where essentially a lot of people notice that the biggest Call of Duty multiplayer component, Warzone, it's like hundreds upon hundreds of gigabytes, and it keeps increasing in size. And most gamers are like, hold up, it shouldn't be this big. Like, this is not like there's not a lot of unique assets per se. But then what's going on is the suspicion is that they're double loading or like redundantly loading in memory in certain places so that things load quickly for people, and it's essentially just copy pasting the same asset or memory thing in a different location, which makes it a lot bigger than it looks from inside, but it's to make sure players' experiences are smooth, loads fast. Because it's totally possible a player from like, not that this is normal gameplay, can like land in like the southwest corner of the map, and then for some reason want to go to the northeast corner. And that game better be smooth and not choppy as that player for some reason goes from like point A to point B across the map.
Mm-hmm.
And as well as seeing other players along the way, et cetera, et cetera. But this is getting to like unnecessary technical challenges.
Okay, so I want to talk about the ethics of video games right now. No, I'm just kidding.
Ooh.
We did get Me Too'd a couple years ago, but later than Hollywood.
Yeah.
That's all that deserved, basically.
Yeah.
Like, it happened.
So is this like problematic for like especially like other countries who want access to video games? Because like what you're saying, it like has so much memory, right? So like, for example, like when I went to Ethiopia, I couldn't even use my own phone because it was on a 2G network, right?
Yeah.
So like, I feel like part of the greatness of like video games, particularly these online ones, is that people can connect from anywhere. But if you produce a game that's taking that much memory, you're actually ensuring that certain people don't have access to it because they don't have technology that actually reaches those people.
That is totally possible. And yeah, like you run into the same things that phones could do. It's like, latency issues, like Brazil, right? It's a lot harder for like internet, like not dense, what's the word? Internet weak country to like American servers or whatnot. There's other things like, and there's other elements too that help democratize and maintain consistency, like game consoles. Like they are not generally as powerful as the usual strongest gaming PCs, but there's a consistency to it. So you can guarantee that if you buy an Xbox One in Mexico, that's going to be the same Xbox One someone in Japan is playing if they play Xbox there, or Korea or America does. So in some aspects, there is a consistency and democratization in that sense. But you still run to other places like internet latency, where Asian countries can't play easily with American countries, or compared to like parts of the Middle East, I'd imagine, or Eastern Europe.
Do these differences ever come into play in like some of the decisions that you make? Like, do you ever like look at like the complexity of what you're creating and have to scale back to ensure that you would have like more access?
Oh yeah, I mean, on the art side specifically, it's about how cheap can we make something while still maintaining the original visual intention. And like that, and that's one of the usual challenges for most video games. It's like, can we do the thing as beautifully as possible or as intended, as cheaply as possible? I mean, and some companies fail to do that more than others, depending on what's going on. I mean, I think Nintendo Switch games are generally like that. It's like, how do we deliver a quality gaming experience that we want, that fits our vision, but also manages to not like, or it manages to scale up well. Like, obviously, there's a lot of like older Nintendo games that scale up pretty well, I think, towards Nintendo Switch right now because they were deliberately built to be fairly technology intensity agnostic. Like Pikmin, I think of most of the Zelda series. Mario, obviously, it's like, it doesn't look complicated, but that means you can export that out pretty easily.
As an artist, does that change like the way that you feel about your work? Like sometimes having to sacrifice for the gameplay, like accessibility, or are you just like, fuck yeah, people are playing the character that I designed, and this is like so cool and godlike?
I mean, but it's once again game dependent. I mean, when joining ILM, I remember, I think this is when I'm allowed to say this. Like, I remember specifically saying this would be I would like this opportunity because I haven't had the opportunity to work on a game that focused so much on polishing something, like making it look good. Most of the games I've worked on in the past they're beautiful in their own right, but a lot of it they were born out of trying to get a lot done in a short amount of time, which at a production level is like impressive. But I'll admit a lot of I won't name the games at least at the moment where like I look at the thing and I'm like, this is challenging to make and I love that I made it, but if you didn't know what it took to get this done in the context of how to get it done, it doesn't look that good. And especially between other artists, it's like all they're going to see is just what it looks like kind of thing. So it definitely affects like what jobs you take, what games you decide to work on. I mean, you talk to artists all the time in the industry. It's like they want to, like they'll burn out after working on like a cartoon game, so they want to work on something realistic later. But one of the ironies is that like, hey, we know you're an expert at this cartoon style. You want to work on another cartoon style game, but the guy's like, I want to work on Call of Duty. So you run into those issues still. Personally, as an artist, and just at an industry level, like studios. I'm thinking about Naughty Dog. There we go. Naughty Dog made Crash Bandicoot back in the day. That's the same studio that's now making Uncharted, The Last of Us, the original game series before the TV show came out. That's the same studio. And that'd be like an interesting conversation with them about like...
Wildly different.
Oh, yeah. And so like what conversations in their head did it take and what did they needed to do to rehire or to hire more people that were like, we get that we were making like Mario style games in the past, but we're dead serious. We're trying to make like movie quality, Indiana Jones style experiences now.
Are there ever any games that you have to release cultural differences for any reason? Yeah.
Yeah. The obvious ones I can think of is China has a lot of demands that are both mostly known, but they don't have an explicit list that they hand out. And so there's constant conversations you have with studios who are like, well, we want to release a game in China, but we at best know what you're allowed to do because these other games got away with it, or we're able to have these elements. I'm thinking of things like
a lot of red.
You can't have, what is it? It's like you can't have characters wearing white because it like reminds... Oh, no. You can't do certain culture, like visualizations or certain visual elements because it's going to remind people of like death or funeral stuff in China. That it wouldn't communicate that in a different country, but China doesn't want that to happen. Blood. No blood in games in China. So they can release Mortal Kombat in China. They just have to remove the blood. And sometimes...
What is it, just like sparkles that shoot off when they get kicked? Or?
It's just yellow lightning bolts.
One game basically replaced it with sweat. So whatever 3D models of blood there were, they just like, all right, change the shader to make it look like wet water.
Okay, that's like, you know what, I respect the efficiency there. I really wish they would have put sparkles in.
So yeah, I mean, basically the games industry deals with the same thing that like Top Gun Maverick did and Hollywood does. We just have, we have a slightly easier time most of the time. It becomes more of an issue, obviously, when it's like, oh, the story has to have blood. Like, how do we communicate? Or the game just doesn't get released. And it's more frustrating that countries like China just don't have an explicit list. You just have inter-industry conversations about what's approved, what's not approved, and what's gotten through and what has not gotten through.
Practices and precedents, yeah.
So.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot of information.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got through our niche interest of just wanting to know how that character even comes into existence. But how does a professional in this industry come into existence?
Okay. Just take art classes, and this is oversimplifying. Take art classes, keep making art, practicing art, learning more about the art, and make sure you're gearing most of your art projects towards like usable game art kind of thing. And if I break it down a little bit more, I know my history is that I did a combination of foundational art classes like figure drawing, learning how to paint, learning basic design 101, learning how to draw, etc. And then also taking the time to go online to find tutorials, videos, join polycount.com, which is this simultaneously hobbyist and professional site for video game artists. Community is a lot different now, but back then it was very much like you could post your art there and both professionals and hobbyists in the industry would be like, that sucks. The lighting on this sucks. Change this color to this. Your anatomy's off because your deltoid is not inserting properly into your arm, et cetera, et cetera. But it would be like direct feedback and helpful people. Like for the life of me, I can't think of another online community I've joined, barring Discord participation, that has been like that direct and that helpful. And granted, there's a funny joke on Polycount where it's like, you know, there's a username like XXDarkblade9000XX. But that's like a real person in like Canada somewhere. So I'd eventually meet that person.
Like
at,
XX start with XXX.
Right. So that'd be the joke. It's like, oh, you're fucking like penis breath, like for some reason. At like in San Francisco, I'd meet him at the business club. Like, no, his name is like Joe and lives out in like Montauk or something, and he works remotely.
No,
so it's a real person. It's just
breath.
Right. Right. It's a mostly male industry too, so it's a bunch of stupid names.
Yeah.
I mean, mine.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What is yours?
I mean, now it's Jedi Panda if I have it as an online handle.
Okay.
I mean, my Yahoo email address when I first opened it was like Demon Hunter 800, which is a specific reference to a World of Warcraft character. But like now, it's like okay, now I need something that's like time agnostic. It like somewhat describes me or somehow, and like I can visualize it easily. But edgelord names held.
Edgelord names are great. Who doesn't love that?
I mean, there's a French artist I know, or French Canadian artist, who her name is Tits on Polycount.
Beautiful. Wait, what are you saying? Polycount?
Polycount. Polycount.com.
My
the
friend
community's. Go ahead.
was Paper Girl 420, and Rebecca was looking at some of our reviews, and she was like, "Oh, Paper Girl 420 reviewed us," and I was like, "Oh yeah, I know who that is."
So in short, that website and like other resources are definitely directly helpful to be like, all right, so how do I take my foundational art skills and apply them to making a 3D model? Like, how do I learn how to use software like Maya, Modo, ZBrush, Unreal Engine, et cetera, Substance Painter? Most of that information is online. I did go to university. USC had a game design undergraduate program that I went to, but you don't have to do that. And there's constant. I don't think it's a debate necessarily, but it's just a constant reevaluation of it's in the industry of like, do you need a degree? Technically, no. Yeah. But I'll use USC as an example. USC is such a large private university, has such an alumni network, and has so many resources that what it for sure did for me as I reflect back on it was attract all these ambitious psychopaths together at one school. And those ambitious psychopaths got stuff done. I mean, my senior year project, besides me being the art director, our engineering lead, Drew Arridge, like he's worked at Riot Games before on League of Legends. Our lead gameplay designer, James Corcoran, did his internship at Oracle. Most of the people on that team had like professional internships done by the time we got to our senior thesis project kind of thing. And that doesn't have to be everybody, but just to describe the convalescence of talent that happened. Yeah. Not going to college kind of makes that more difficult. Obviously, with internet now, it's easier to find communities and whatnot, but it's just obviously a little easier to make friends in person, drinking, at an a cappella group, etc. So,
were you in an a cappella group?
Oh, hell no. No.
I thought we were about to uncover
I'm
some.
So excited.
No, I appreciate a cappella, but that's like
dreams.
You know what the calculation was at the time? It's like why am I paying $55,000 a year at the school? It's to learn how to make games. Like I can catch up with karaoke shit afterwards.
About my education costs because I went to Davis and it was expensive, and it wasn't that expensive. So
or as a state school, right? But it's a value above zero, right?
Yeah.
And I'll even admit on my end, like the financial aid attack that I had to do to like get them to give me money was several arguments with the school.
But we're proud of you.
I appreciate you as a, a very straight shooter. And this is something that I always find in people who work in the aesthetic arts. Like, you're willing to, take a look at your financial aid and, go, talk to someone about it. Or just, I feel like people in the aesthetic arts, they deal in absolutes. Whereas, there's the interpretive arts, the, acting, singing, dancing, moving the body versus, no, this is a genre, this is a trend, this is what is coming through in the medium. And I just feel like you as a person also embody that. You're very unabashed, unashamed, and also I met you through stand-up comedy. Right. You go to any subject, talk about anything. It's a very honest perspective that I find of people in the aesthetic arts. It's
that is surprising to hear, because I would have thought most artists are loosey-goosey and psychopathic and
me.
right. I'm just who? What other aesthetic, even fine artists?
Well, I find it. Yeah, I mean, I'm just putting you in the same bucket as another friend of mine who's a consultant for a streaming platform. Okay. So he works around creatives, he understands creativity, but he's if you do this, this is what you'll get. This is the ratings you'll get. These are the audience you'll get. Oh. This is the interpretation you'll get. Yeah. It's not about being as much the interpreter of that, or it's not about doing the interpretation. It's this is what the output is the translation. And I don't know, it's a dealing in absolutes that's my brain is so different.
I think the way I've come to the same perception is mostly just because like what I do is production art. Like it is making art, but it's for the purposes of like we have a game to ship, we have an experience to deliver, and where so much of my like professional philosophy and like tone also leads to my personal life. But that's because it's like I've grown up in an environment where it's like feedback is usually precise and pretty brutal, even though they don't mean to be. But we call them Europeans, and then the other part's like there's deadlines, like there's things to deliver, and for sure, like in the range of artists that exist in the game art pipeline, concept artists, like they are straight up just like painters and whatnot. So those people are very artistic and like my feelings relative to like everybody else. And then you have tech artists who are weird motherfuckers because like they're in the pipeline, there are artists, but they're the individuals like I know, like I want to make art with computer code, and like I want to help figure out how to interpret light in a 3D environment kind of thing. My brain philosophically understands it, but to get to the point where I'm learning how to do maths, how to do that, that's a whole other fucking thing. And I'm like, like if I had more time, I would. It's just like go do you thing.
Is there a big European influence in gaming? Because also you do maths and you do kilometers and you do.
Oh, it's just because I'm a weird Anglophile. Like I play bagpipes, and I have a kilt, so.
No, but it seems like you're the translator, though. Right? Like you are talking to the people who have this conceptual idea.
Yeah.
And like you're not the coder that's adding like the function into it. You are translating those two worlds into a visual aspect that they have requested.
Yeah.
And I think that's like it's a very like probably niche skill set, kind of what Rebecca was hitting on before, because like the artist is very creative and out there and like, oh, this is what I feel like. I'm feeling a little like cerulean today, not a cayenne, right? Where like you're sitting there and you're like, yeah, but if we want to create a circle, we're going to have to do X, Y, and Z. Like whatever color you want it is fine. If you want it cerulean, you want it cayenne is fine. But this is how we take this. And so this other guy can add the function into it with his programming or whatever. It seems very like narrow because you have to speak, it seems like various different languages. Like you have to know the artistic side. You also have to know the programming side. Mm-hmm. And then you have to know like where those worlds meet.
Yeah. And you're hitting the nail on the head. The most game artists or like visual artists in this space are having to balance some volume of like left brain thinking and right brain thinking. Like my job, as you said, it's making calculations constantly of like, okay, so I want to do this thing, but how much is this going to cost? Or how's this going to affect the job of the next person that's animating this kind of thing? Like, of course I want it to look this way, but once again, can we get to the objective and the visual look that we want as efficiently as possible generally? Give or take every other element involved. And most game artists who are worth their salt or have this experience are making those constant calculations throughout the pipeline. Like animators, character artists, environment artists, world builders, concept artists, art directors, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so there are people who do just clouds.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, like, Destiny 2 from Bungie, straight up, they have hired people that all their job is to do is make skyboxes, like make the clouds look pretty, they can animate well. It sounds stupid, but like a game like Destiny where there's so many beautiful outdoor spaces, like they have to, they're contributing to the visual world building outside. But that's a game that's so they have a huge hard on for like beautiful outdoor spaces and architectural designs. So it makes sense. Like Mario doesn't require
a term of hard on. I think that was.
I mean, they're there to erect very visual, like beautiful visuals outside and
erect.
What other phallic imagery can I use?
This is great. This is how I know you're in the video game industry.
I mean, I'm kind of I can't make these jokes at work, so I'm pretty sure I'm amidst people with a sense of humor.
We'd like to think so, but we'll let the listeners let us know if we do or not.
Right. This is not going to get you guys banned on iTunes, right? They're totally fine with.
We are
we're fully explicit, and we're on YouTube. They don't get it.
And I've only made Rebecca remove one thing so far, and that was when she really crossed the line. Oh. No. It was not even that. Neither of us would say that, and that's not okay. I am down for swearing, not slurring. Okay, we don't slur.
She has principles.
That's actually I like that statement.
Yeah,
very efficient.
I like that.
Yeah, fuck everybody.
If you want an N-word card, though, I have nieces and nephews that might be able to provide one.
No.
Like a cardboard cutout. It's not legit looking, but
As a
Take it
white
as you will.
person, I can't even talk about this. I can't even have this
Okay.
conversation.
Leave it to us to get to this wild card subject. We always derail.
The Asian card's pretty. We hand those out pretty freely. You just have to come to the meeting.
I feel like
Thank you.
if an Asian person says the N word, I'm like, it's not up to me.
But you would still join in on the gang that's beating up that Asian person. Like there was like a brief moment of like confusion. Like, did he just say what I think he said? And then the second thought's like, wait, but
does he have a card?
I'm not joining anybody beating up on anybody, and if someone says something wrong, I'm leaving the room. So
remove.
Oh my gosh.
I like that.
I've learned. Okay. What else do you need to correct from the part 1 that we got just either horribly wrong or that maybe we got right and you have some more to add to?
I mean, the tablets are involved. Like we're using digital tablets to work. I mean,
okay, but this was my distinction. Like, can you use the tablet to draw on a 3D object?
Yeah. So there is like Substance Painter is a 3D painting program that loads in a 3D model, and with a Photoshop-like interface, you can start painting and stacking layers and using effects to paint on the 3D model, as if it's like a miniature you're painting a 3D space. It's just you have more Photoshop-like tools to get that job done.
I imagine they're making new tools all the time, and that's probably one of those things like that you're mentioning on this user platform where it's like kind of crowdsourcing ideas, information, latest trends, which we find on this podcast. A lot of people use Reddit, and now there's always a space like that, where it's like crowdsourced civilian self-made kind
which
of
is
things. Polycount. Yes. Thank you, Jackie. Yeah. Just that's where you kind of learn like, okay, this is the next tool I need to learn how to use because we're using Real Engine now. And like we're using, like always pushing into that frontier. Do you guys angle in on the AI debate?
Oh yeah. There are, without naming names and being specific, multiple colleagues both close to the chest and outside of my immediate purview. We are actively discussing, debating, fearful, concerned, anxious about the AI stuff. I will say personally, like, shout out to the WGA and SAG-AFTRA. Like, of all the people in the world, like, they are the ones taking the first bullet in terms of actively fighting against it. Like, I am not immediately at threat. Like, my job is immediately at threat, but we're basically next in line is what it feels like. Because most of the AI stuff that we've seen is AI 2D art, but there hasn't been like a massive feat of.
They can't do those hands.
Well, yeah, there we go. That's one. But there's already a joke about like most artists can't. Like artists understand hands being the hardest damn thing.
That's why Matt Groening did the 4-finger Simpsons.
Exactly.
Hands are hard.
But AI is happening, and as other colleagues agree with me, like it's going to happen. It's going to implement itself. We just don't know what the shakedown is going to look like. I mean, if we think about social media, it's the same thing. Like we are in a new generation of social media use, especially because of the elections over the last 5 years or so. I think the most reasonable thought I can think of is like, this is going to happen. We just don't know how exactly. And it's funny to kind of see over speculation or a lack of speculation and people struggling to kind of figure out like, what is the most useful thing about this? And I mean, but it is coming. I mean, there's obviously already people are obviously already using tools that are AI driven. My personal interest is just the legality surrounding it of how is the federal government, or if anybody's going to go out of their way to figure out, all right, so if you're scraping all this data and you're not paying people for this data, like what's the legality behind that? Are we going to pay? Is that company going to pay everybody for every single image they've used? What's that pay scale going to look like if you do that? Et cetera, et cetera. So it's a large topic, but to keep it simple, it's coming. It'd be dumb for production artists like myself to not use it eventually. What is for sure stopping most production artists, like the people working on video games right now or movies or television, is the legality surrounding it, because they don't want to use it and then all of a sudden, like 5 years down the line, like the Supreme Court's like, hey, by the way, like all this data you use to drive your AI stuff, you have to now pay those people or they can sue you outright. And it's in that apocalyptic scenario, like it's better to not do it and wait till things are defined, things settle down, kind of thing. But the technology is being actively worked on, of course, by like multiple people, as we all seen. Like NVIDIA, who's a major graphics card manufacturer for video game purposes most of the time, they have already presented like, here is AI generated dialogue options for like an RPG scenario. Like you just ask a random ass question to this NPC, we will in real time generate custom audio, animate this 3D character's model face to talk as if he's actually talking, lip sync properly. So you have a NPC that's fairly flexible relative to the scenario that you happen to be in. And that's just one company.
I have so many thoughts. Mainly, I just feel the need to like thank you, machine overlords of the future. I'm ready to serve you in whatever way that you need me to. And also, like, I like
Wow.
vacations to the beach, so plug me in, please.
Traitor, turncoat.
I am literally afraid of the machine overlords. You think I joke every time I say this, but
That's real.
legit, they're coming for us. If they haven't already. Okay. So
It's just, I think you're imagining them as like machines, but really it's still people behind what's going on.
and people are innately evil. So,
Sure, yeah.
here we are. Okay, let's get back to the subject of the podcast instead of Jackie's paranoia corner. Any other questions, Bex, that you have? I have a lot of questions, but I think you'll have to come back for another episode and we'll get into the nitty.
Oh, I'd love to, yeah. I mean, these are large, beautiful topics I can keep going on and on about.
Yeah, I feel like we knocked out my major questions of how we do the actual, for a first scraping, of how we do the actual art, and then, methods of becoming a professional. Yeah, I think there's a lot to learn and be discussed. I'm like, okay, what platform should I get? Should I get a Nintendo Switch? Should I get a PlayStation? Should I just use Steam and use my PC?
They're all valid. It just depends on what you want, right? I mean, I bought a Switch because I only originally bought a Switch because that's the only device I could play while on a treadmill.
Good to
While
know.
on a treadmill.
Yeah, because you could
know. I have
Because hands-free controller?
and you just place the screen on the mount, and then with your arms, like Mario Kart, you can play Mario Kart.
That's like you're in it. You're like, what? You're like on the treadmill and you're.
If you play that kind of game,
do something in real life. You know that, right? Like you could go out and run in the real world with real people.
Okay, you have an Oculus.
And I don't know how to use it right now because I got locked out of my Facebook. So, like, again, I love to panic buy for no reason. Just saying I own something does not mean
right. And like the connecting Facebook accounts to the Meta Oculus account has been a big controversy, understandably.
I was connected, but then I forgot. I didn't use it for a while, and then I got drunk and tried to connect to my Oculus, and I apparently forgot my Facebook password.
Right.
And then I was drunk, so I tried to re-verify it like 6 times, and then Facebook was like, "You need to wait 2 weeks, and then you have to do it within a week to like fix it." And then I forgot, and now I can't access my Facebook.
That's fucky. Okay.
Welcome to my life. Okay.
I almost want to see if I know any Meta friends that might be able to help you out, but otherwise,
I don't deserve that.
I mean, it's no sweat off my back. It's just like a LinkedIn search and then an email.
The best part is that I actually downloaded everything from my Facebook recently. So I'm like, fuck it. You know what? This is where I live now. I'm Facebook free now.
Get off the grid.
Okay. If you're free, then yeah.
I've always been free.
Okay, Jackie, are we going to try our best? Oh, she's got a Post-it note.
I got like 7. Okay. You start with putting Mario in a tofu suit.
A tofu set?
A tofu suit. A silhouette is really great because good is good. And
that's smart words. Good is good. Yeah, silhouette. It's that. I mean, we're starting with we're trying to end up at the end goal of a memorable, functional character. So you got to start. It's like the way in the Great British Bake Off, where they're like, if you're going to do a simple cake, you've got to do the very best simple cake. It's got to be the best ingredients, love. So it's you got to have the best memorable silhouette.
Yeah, you got to have thumbnails that are pick fair. Okay.
I don't know that was said at any point.
Oh, that sounds like a lexicon.
Illustration. You add an illustration with colors, okay, and then you make it a 3D guy like Panda.
Okay, I am 3-dimensional, yes.
I get that. It's like, yeah, we're starting with like the base elements, the purest form, and then maybe we're adding some variation, some color, and then we're getting it to like the maxed out version so that the 3D character artist can then take it into a 3D space, start building those polygons on a 3D model, overlaying
with a lot of vertices. They have a lot of vertices, the polygons.
A lot of vertices, the finer art and vertices on top, but the base model has to have the
and we got to get high fidelity, and we're doing that through ZBrush.
No, this is reminding me, there's a lot of like technical lexicon that I'm also now like, oh god, this is.
We're making you more grateful for what you know.
Right.
There's also Maya and Unreal.
Unreal Engine. Actually, I might be getting scanned into Unreal Engine soon. But I'm not allowed to because then they'll have my image in perpetuity.
I mean, I have
And
a separate
eventually-
scanner if you want to use that.
Eventually, you make a low poly model with low fidelity. You bake that into some details on the lo-fi.
Yeah, I think the lo-fi model is for like the programming details, so like to the 3D character to be like understood in the system, and then what you want the like a higher quality one to have more artistry into it, a different kind of coding built into it, so it actually renders in a beautiful
And the pixels
realistic
bend
way.
light like magic.
Sure.
Then you get the alchemy. I told you there was blood sacrifice involved.
There was, and because that's where we get to this, which was bearskin rug with pixels, and then something about equals a texture map, and this is where I drew my picture. And it's a little bearskin rug.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bearskin rug. Yeah, that's a bearskin rug.
I told you there was a diagram.
And then, you've got your team who thinks about real world things like rendering in other countries and
Rendering with smiley face. Yeah, I got it. I nailed it.
You guys are so talking.
Ta-da!
Okay. That's an 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
We improved. Okay.
Slightly. 7 out of 10 was already pretty generous. So.
Yeah. We know.
I wrote down
We know.
so many words, though.
But to be fair, as I'm thinking about this conversation over the last hour or so, like I'm realizing I've failed to communicate the exact pipeline. Well,
You did it really well. If I listened to this again, I think I would actually understand at least half of it.
Right. That's how learning happens.
Are we going to go out and be 3D character artists? No. But it's like, we're getting closer to like an understanding of the thing that we like love and enjoy, and an appreciation level understanding.
And I know what a polygon is now, so.
A shape.
We've learned.
Yeah.
We've learned.
Something you should have learned in primary education.
I was about to say.
I did learn it. I just forgot it. And I was like, I know poly means mini, but I was like.
This is like when, your math teacher's like, math is all around you. You'll use math all your life. And you're like, where is it? Well, it's in the video games, apparently.
Honest to God, yeah.
That doesn't surprise me. And I love math, but I hated geometry, so everyone could fuck off, okay? That was not my
Those
subject.
proofs were not that hard.
Fuck you, dude. That was like literally, that was like my nightmare. You give me algebra, I'm here all day. You give me geometry, and I don't understand how a curve works. Triangles are scary, and my geometry teacher hated me, so.
Triangles are the best shape.
I guess.
This is bringing up trauma for
It
Jackie.
is the smallest shape you can make in a game engine.
See? Shows you.
Like otherwise two vertices is just a line. That's not.
Wow, that's like philosophy.
That's like really like sad. Like that's like the lone, like I've never heard something so lonely. Like 2 vertices is just a line. Like,
And it won't even render because there's no shape. There's no surface.
It won't even render.
Because there's no surface area.
I am 2 vertices and I can't render.
Like you exist, but no one can see you.
Yes.
I'm wow. This logic is somehow creating emotional distress.
We have read between the lines, and we have read Jackie to filth.
I've never been so seen in my life.
Wow. Well, I'm so glad that we got to pull you out of the 2D into the 3D world, Jackie.
Right.
Do you have any final questions, predictions, omens?
No, we should do this one again, though. This was fun.
Yeah, and let's get Sean on the horn next time, and we can really get some.
I just can't answer any Disney questions. Basically.
Okay, fuck Disney. No, I didn't say it. Sorry, Disney. Don't get mad at me.
You're allowed to have an opinion, and we'll take your money either way.
Exactly.
Actually, I just watched Mulan and cried 5 times, so whatever. Here I am.
That sounds offensive. Actually, that movie did not deserve.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is that pro-China? Is that pro?
I was just back from fucking Australia, and I was really tired. And like the dad was like, sometimes the flower blooms late, and I was like, I also bloom late.
Damn.
Wow.
That makes okay.
Well, do you have anything to plug? Concepts in general, projects specifically? What's coming on your horizon?
Follow ILM Immersive on all social medias. That's the studio I work for right now. We are cranking on some really awesome projects. Hopefully, they'll be in people's hands very soon. At least the first thing I worked on when I joined the team. What else? If you buy enough Disney stuff, I will jokingly say we can hire back all 7,000 people that we laid off. So just keep spending your money on Disney stuff, and
I got that Disney Plus, so I got you.
you could do more. You could do absolutely more. You can do more.
We're going to Disneyland.
We're going to Disneyland.
Personally, for me, I do stand-up comedy. Comedy, as Rebecca pointed out earlier. You can follow me on Jade I Panda, JADEEYE, like your eyeball, and then Panda like Panda Bear, Jade I Panda. I do have an OnlyFans you can follow. Help me pay for my future child support. I don't know which ex is going to come back.
Oh my god.
Oh, they haven't come back now, so I'm fine. But you never know. Never know.
Future ex.
It's only $5 a month to go basically see almost every single moment of all the shows I do, every single open mic. So you can kind of see jokes go from terrible to less terrible, and hopefully the funniest they could possibly be. But it's only $5 a month. One of my best friends is following me, and my accountant is also one of the subscribers. So there's definitely space to get in on the action.
That's cool. So you're one of the pioneers who's kind of like using OnlyFans as a medium to escape some of the other platforms that it's harder to put your comedy out on. And, I mean, I guess that'd be more for people who are doing specials, like people like big platforms take a percentage, but it's more than just nudie Judies.
Right, and in my head, it's like I'll post clips of stuff on Instagram and TikTok, but if you want like the full jabroni, the comedy in the nude, as it were, in the raw, you go to my OnlyFans and you'll get to see the whole show, kind of thing.
Not just
do they really get to see the whole show though?
I mean,
you're gonna have to subscribe to find out, Jackie.
Yeah, exactly. How about this? You guys subscribe, like say 100 subscribers, I will show more skin on stage at some point. I already wore a kilt at some point at one show back in Oakland.
Okay.
And and of course on my Instagram and other social medias, I will post my show dates. I mean, as of this taping, I'll be at the Bourbon Room on Thursday evening, and I run C Students Detention Comedy with Andre Mulligan every Monday night at Senor Fish in downtown LA. We have awesome comics from all over, and it's comedy storytelling and $4 margaritas on a Monday night.
Winner.
That's the best happy hour special I can possibly think of, and it's an open kitchen. So come on by, kick back, and listen to some awesome comedy storytelling. Awesome. And a black guy and a Korean guy yelling at each other.
Sounds delightful. Where
else can you get all that?
I think he tolerates me because his wife's Korean, so I'm just like the male version of what he deals with at home. It's abuse through familiarity, most likely.
I don't know if that's healthy, but that's
comedy
fair.
Healthy? What? That's not a thing.
No, there's a lot of
exactly.
Okay, well, we will definitely come down and check you out at the frog place that you mentioned. And did I say it right? Frog.
Senor Fish in downtown LA.
You were thinking Senor Frogs, I think, maybe?
That's something else.
Definitely was. You knew where.
You could also check me out on OnlyFans, too. That's also a valid place to...
And we'll be hitting that 100 subscribers on OnlyFans.
Well, thank you for joining us and giving us a mini deep dive. Mm-hmm. This has reignited my nerdy passion. I'm going to go right out and buy some Disney video games.
Please, to help us hire back my friends. It would be lovely. But yeah, thank you guys for having me. It's I haven't talked game dev in a while, so this has been an interesting reprieve.
Well,
damn.
I will not say I'm an expert, but I feel more knowledgeable.
We're enthusiasts now.
That's good to hear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now just spend that money. Just go out and...
I will.
There we go.
That was great. And that was the show. Thank you everyone for watching, and we hope you stay curious.
If you enjoyed this video, watch our other videos here on YouTube, or you should listen to the episode on We're Experts Now podcast. Bex, where can they find us?
You can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeart Music.
And what if they want to talk to us?
If you have ideas for something you want us to investigate, send us an email at we'reexpertspod@gmail.com. That's wereexpertspod@gmail.com.
Great job on that spelling.
Ooh.
A+. Do you do this professionally?
I believe we're both doing it professionally right now.
Wow. People should know about this.
I completely agree, and you can find us on Instagram at We're Experts Now Pod.
Thanks again, and if you enjoy the show, subscribe and comment, and do not forget to leave a 5-star tip.
That's a great idea. Are you a podcast expert?
I think we both are. I think
we're experts now.
This has been a Just Being Better Media production.